Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western Literary Canon out loud. Today we begin Journal Collection number 35, obviously by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and this particular collection dates from the year 1844, and Emerson would turn 41 in that year. And with that said, as usual, these collections start with a editor's sort of biographical note, and I will read that. Mr. Emerson did not begin the year with any courses of lectures, but was called through the winter to give a lecture, sometimes two, in Boston, Providence, Salem, Fall River, Cambridge, Dorchester, and smaller towns, for lyceums were everywhere and well attended. He had to prepare the final issue of the Dial, now moribund. The correspondence with Carlyle shows that each was looking after the interest of the other's books and sending proceeds across the ocean. End note. January 1844. There is no expression in any of our poetry, state papers, lecture rooms, or churches of a high national feeling. Only the conventional life is considered. I think the German papers greatly more earnest and aspiring. Quote, "Conventional worth is intolerable where personal is wanting," said Schlegel, who announces to us in journal or pulpit or lecture room, quote, "Alone may man do the impossible." Finish each day before you begin the next, and interpose a solid wall of sleep between two. This you cannot do without temperance. January 30th. I wrote to Mr. F. that I had no experiences nor progress to reconcile me to the calamity whose anniversary returned the second time last Saturday. The senses have a right to their method as well as the mind. There should be harmony in facts as well as in truths. Yet these ugly breaks happen there, which the continuity of theory does not contemplate. The amends are of a different kind from the mischief. But the astonishment of life is the absence of any appearances of reconciliation between the theory and practice of life. Introvert your eye, and your consciousness is a taper in the desert of eternity. It is the channel, though now demolished to a thread, through which torrents of light roll and flow in the high tides of spontaneity and reveal the landscape of the dusky universe. That idea which I approach and am magnetized by is my country. How we love to be magnetized! Ah, ye strong iron currents, take me in also. We are so apologetic, such waifs and straws, ducking and imitating, and then the mighty thought comes sailing on a silent wind and fills us also with its virtue, and we stand like Atlas on our legs and uphold the world. The magnetism is alone to be respected. The men are steel filings. I am sorry to say that the Numas and Pythagorases have usually a spice of charlatanism, and that abolition societies and communities are dangerous fixtures. The manliness of man is a frail and exquisite fruit which does not keep its perfection 24 hours. Its sweet fragrance cannot be bottled or barreled or exported. Carlyle is an eloquent writer, but his recommendations of immigration and education appear very inadequate. Noble as it seems to work for the race and hammer out constitutions for phalanxes, it can only be justly done by mediocre thinkers, or men of practical, not theoretic faculty. As soon as a scholar attempts it, I suspect him. Good physicians have least faith in medicine. Good priests the least faith in church forms. That bread which we ask of nature is that she should entrance us, but amidst her beautiful or her grandest pictures I cannot escape the second thought. We have the wish to forget night and day, father and mother, food and ambition, but we never lose our dualism. Blessed, wonderful nature, nevertheless, without depth, but with immeasurable lateral spaces. If we look before us, if we compute our path, it is very short. Nature has only the thickness of a shingle or a slate. We come straight to the extremes, but sideways and at unawares the present moment opens into other moods, and moments, rich, prolific, leading onward without end, impossible to bring her, the goddess, to praise. Coquettes with us, hides herself in coolness and generalities, pointed and personal is she never. Here follows a short quotation by Heraclitus, which is actually translated in the footnote. We live their death, but we have died the life of each. The daguerreotype of the soul. The oracles assert that the impressions of characters and other divine visions appear in ether. This selection is untranslated. And fools rush in where angels fear to tread. So say I of Brook Farm, let it live. Its merit is that it is a new life. Why should we have only 2 or 3 ways of life, and not thousands and millions? This is a new one, so fresh and expensive that they are all homesick when they go away. The shy sentiments are there expressed. The correspondence of that place would be a historiette of the spirit of this age. They might see that in the arrangements of Brook Farm, as out of them, it is the person, not the communist, that avails. Ellery Channing is quite assured that he has a natural malice of expression which is wanting in all the so-called poets of the day. He is very good-natured, and will allow them any merit you choose to claim, but this he always feels to be true. It is infinitely easy to him, as easy as it is for running water to warble, but at the same time impossible to any to whom it is not natural. The highest should alternate the 2 states of the contemplation of the fact in pure intellect, and the total conversion of intellect into energy, angelic insight alternating with bestial activity, sage and tiger. When I address a large assembly, as last Wednesday, I am always apprised what an opportunity is there, not for reading to them, as I do, lively miscellanies, but for painting in fire my thought, and being agitated to agitate. One must dedicate himself to it, and think with his audience in his mind, so as to keep the perspective and symmetry of the oration, and enter into all the easily forgotten secrets of a great nocturnal assembly, and their relation to the speaker. But it would be fine music, and in the present well rewarded. That is, he should have his audience at his devotion, and all other fames would hush before his. Now eloquence is merely fabulous. When we talk of it, we draw on our fancy. It is one of many things which I should like to do, but it requires a 7 years' wooing. Henry Thoreau, with whom I talked of this last night, does not or will not perceive how natural is this, and only hears the word art in a sinister sense. But I speak of instincts. I did not make the desires or know anything about them. I went to the public assembly, put myself in the conditions, and instantly feel this new craving. I hear the voice, I see the beckoning of this ghost. To me it is vegetation, the pullulation and universal budding of the plant man. Some men have the perception of difference predominant, and are conversant with services and trifles, with coats and coaches and faces and cities. These are the men of talent. And other men abide by the perception of identity. These are the Orientals, the philosophers, the men of faith and divinity, the men of genius. These men, whose contempt of soi-disant conservatism cannot be concealed, which is such a conserving as the Quaker's, who keeps in his garments the cut of Queen Anne's time, but has let slip the fire and the love of the first friends, are the real loyalists. Then I discovered the secret of the world, that all things subsist and do not die, but only retire a little from sight, and afterwards return again. The text of our life is accompanied all along by this commentary or gloss of dreams. Henry Thoreau's lines, which pleased me so well, were, quote, "Eye hearing get, who had but ears, and sight, who had but eyes before. I moments live, who lived but years, and truth discern, who had but learning's lore." End quote. The question of the annexation of Texas is one of those which look very differently to centuries and to the years. It is very certain that the strong British race, which have now overrun so much of this continent, must also overrun that tract and Mexico and Oregon also, and it will be in the course of ages be of small import by what particular occasions and methods it was done. It is a secular question. It is quite necessary and true to our New England character that we should consider the question in its local and temporary bearings, and resist the annexation with tooth and nail. It is a measure which goes not by right, nor by wisdom, but by feeling. It would be a pity to dissolve the Union, and so diminish immensely every man's personal importance. We are just beginning to feel our oats. What a pity that a farmer should not live 300 years. We fancy that men are individuals, but every pumpkin in the field goes through every point of pumpkin history. Ah, if any man could conduct in me in the pure stream of that which he pretends to be. Long afterwards I find that quality elsewhere which he promised me. Intoxicating is to me the genius of Plotinus or of Swedenborg. Yet how few particulars of it can I glean from their books. My debt to them is for a few thoughts. They cannot feed that appetite they have created. I should know it well enough if they gave me that which I seek of them. Otherness. Henry Thoreau said he knew but one secret, which was to do one thing at a time, and though he has his evenings for study, if he was in the day inventing machines for sawing his plumbago, he invents wheels all the evening and night also. And if this week he has some good reading and thoughts before him, his brain runs on that all day, whilst pencils pass through his hands. I find in me an opposite facility or perversity, that I never seem well to do a particular work until another is done. I cannot write the poem, though you give me a week, but if I promise to read a lecture day after tomorrow, at once the poem comes into my head, and now the rhymes will flow. And let the proofs of the dial be crowding on me from the printer, and I am full of faculty how to make the lecture. Skeptic. Pure intellect is the pure devil when you have got off all the masks of Mephistopheles. It is a painful symbol to me that the index or forefinger is always the most soiled of the fingers. The two histories. The question is whether the trilobites or whether the gods are our grandfathers, and whether the actual existing men are an amelioration or a degradation arises from the contingents, whether we look from the material or from the poetic side. Railroads make the country transparent. Somebody said of me after the lecture at Amory Hall, within hearing of A.W., quote, "The secret of his popularity is that he has a dam for everybody." End quote. March 12th. One Sunday evening, 10th instant, at the close of the 15th year since my ordination as minister in the second church, I made an address to the people on the occasion of closing the old house, now 123 years old, and the oldest church in Boston. Yesterday they began to pull it down. Bohemian. Intellect is a piratical schooner cruising in all latitudes for its own pot. Consuelo, as Elizabeth Hoare remarked, was the crown of fulfillment of all the tendencies of literary parties in respect to a certain dark knight who has been hovering about in the purlieus of heaven and hell for some ages. The young people have shown him much kindness for some time back. Burns advised him to take advice and mend. Goethe inclined to convert him and save his soul in the friendship of Faust. He has here in America been gaining golden opinions lately, and now in Consuelo he actually mounts the shrine and becomes an object of worship under the name and style of he to whom wrong has been done. A capital merit of Consuelo, the instant mutual understanding between the great as between Albert and Consuelo. Art seems to me to be in the artist a steady respect to the whole by an eye loving beauty and details. Symmetry. Most lovers of beauty are dazzled by the details. To have seen many beautiful details cloys us, and we are better able to keep our rectitude. The straight line is better than the square. A man is the one, a horse the other. Poet. Among the Chaldean oracles, which were either delivered by theurgists under the reign of Marcus Antoninus or by Zoroaster, Taylor inserts the following: rulers who understand the intelligible works of the Father, these he spread like a veil over sensible works and bodies. They are standing transporters whose employment consists in speaking to the Father and to matter, in producing apparent imitations of unapparent natures, and in inscribing things unapparent in the apparent fabrication of the world. Concerning the universe. It is an imitation of intellect, but that which is fabricated possesses something of body. Concerning the light above the Empyrean world. In this light, things without figure become figured. See Monthly Magazine, Volume 3, page 509, A.D. 1797. It is curious that intellectual men should be most attractive to women. But women are magnetic, intellectual men are unmagnetic. Therefore, as soon as they meet, communication is found difficult or impossible. By acting rashly, we buy the power of talking wisely. People who know how to act are never preachers. I have always found our American days short. The constitution of a Teutonic scholar with his 12, 13, or 14 hours a day is fabulous to me. I become nervous and piqued with a few days editing the Dial and watching the stagecoach to send proofs to printers. If I try to get many hours in a day, I shall not have any. We work hard in the garden, and do it badly, and often twice or thrice over, but we get our journey out of the curses, as Mr. H.'s Brighton drover said of his pigs. Alston is Adamus ex veteri rup, chip of the old block, boulder of the European ledge, a spur of those Apennines on which Titian, Raphael, Paul Veronese, and Michelangelo sat, cropping out here in this remote America and unlike anything around it, and not reaching its natural elevation. What a just piece of history it is that he should have left this great picture of Belshazzar in two proportions. The times are out of joint, and so in his masterpiece. Alston and Irving and Dana are all European. But in America I grieve to miss the strong black blood of the English race. Ours is a pale, diluted stream. What a company of brilliant young persons I have seen with so much expectation. The sort is very good, but none is good enough of his sort. Every one an imperfect specimen, respectable, not valid. Irving thin, and Channing thin, and Bryant and Dana, Prescott and Bancroft. There is Webster, but he cannot do what he would. He cannot do Webster. The Orientals behave well, but who cannot behave well who has nothing else to do? The poor Yankees who are doing the work are all the wrinkled and vexed. The Shaker told me they did not read history, not because they had not inclination, for there were some who, quote, took up a sound cross and not reading, Milton's Paradise Lost, he knew, was among Charles Lane's books, but he had never read it. Most of them did not know it was there, he knew. There would be an objection to reading it. They read the Bible and their own publications. They write their own poetry. Quote, all their hymns and songs of every description are manufactured in the society. In the actual world, the population, we say, is the best that could yet be. Its evils as war and property are acknowledged, which is a new fact, and the first step to the remedying of them. But the remedying is not a work for society, but for me to do. If I am born to it, I shall see the way. If the evil is an evil to you, you are party, chief party to it. Say not, you are not covetous, if the chief evil of the world seem to you covetousness. I am always environed by myself. What I am, all things reflect to me. The state of me makes Massachusetts and the United States out there. I also feel the evil, for I am covetous, and I do not prosecute the reform because I have another task nearer. I think substantial justice can be done maugre or through the money of society, and though it is an imperfect system and noxious, yet I do not know how to attack it directly, and am assured that the directest attack which I can make on it is to lose no time in fumbling and striking about in all directions, but to mind the work that is mine, and accept the facilities and openings which my constitution affords me. The Peace Society speaks civilly of trade, in its attacks on war. Well, let the trade make hay whilst the sun shines, but know very well that when the war is disposed of, trade is the next object of incessant attack, and has only the privilege of being last devoured. Very sad indeed it was to see this half-god driven to the wall, reproaching men, and hesitating whether he should not reproach the gods. The world was not, on trial, a possible element for him to live in. A lover of law had tried whether law could be kept in this world, and all things answered no. He had entertained the thought of leaving it, and going where freedom and element could be found. And if he should be found tomorrow at the roadside, it would be the act of the world. We pleaded guilty to perceiving the inconvenience and the inequality of property, and he said, I will not be a convict. Very tedious and prosing and egotistical and narrow he is, but a profound insight, a power, a majestical man, looking easily along the centuries to explore his contemporaries with a painful sense of being an orphan and a hermit here. I feel his statement to be partial and to have fatal omissions, but I think I shall never attempt to set him right any more. It is not for me to answer him, though I feel the limitations and exaggeration of his picture, and the wearisome personalities. His statement proves too much. It is a reductio ad absurdum. But I was quite ashamed to have just revised and printed last week the old paper denying the existence of tragedy, when this modern Prometheus was in the heat of his quarrel with the gods. Alcott has been writing poetry, he says, all winter. I fear there is nothing for me in it. His overpowering personality destroys all poetic faculty. It is strange that he has not the confidence of one woman. He would be greater if he were good-humored, but such as he is, he, quote, enlarges the known powers of man, quote, as was said of Michelangelo. A man sends to me for money that he may pursue his studies in theology. He wants $50 or $60 and says he wants it the, quote, last of this week or fore part of next, end quote. W.G. dreamed that he had disposed of books and the world in his frontal peace of mind, but did not well know what to do with the reply that the past has a new value every moment to the advancing mind. I find it settled that while many persons have attraction for me, these styles are incompatible. Each is mine, but I love one because it is not the other. What skepticism is like this? Hence the philosophers concluded that the Turk was right, Mohammed was right, and Jesus was wrong. I wish to have rural strength and religion for my children, and I wish city facility and polish. I find with chagrin that I cannot have both. Carlo. I spent the winter in the country. Thick-starred Orion was my only companion. I preferred the forest, dry forest. Water made me feel forlorn. Writers are so few that there are none. Writing is an impossibility until it is done. A man gives you his paper and hopes there is something in it, but does not know. There is nothing in it. Do not open it. When a man makes what he calls an answer to a speculative question, he commonly changes the phrase of the question. But the only conversation we wish to hear is two affirmatives, and again two affirmatives, and so on. Able men do not care in what work a man is able, so only as he is able. Character brings to whatever it does a great superfluity of strength, which plays a gay accompaniment, the air with variations. Here Daniel Webster argue a jury cause. He imports all the experience of the Senate and the state and the man of the world into the county court. C inquired why I would not go to B. but the great inconvenience is sufficient to answer. If I could freely and manly go to the mountains, or to the prairie, or to the sea, I would not hesitate for inconvenience, but to cart all my pots and kettles, kegs and clothespins, and all that belongs thereunto, over the mountains seems not worth while. I should not be nearer to sun or star. May 8th. This morn the air smells of vanilla and oranges. Our people are slow to learn the wisdom of sending character instead of talent to Congress. Again and again they have sent a man of great acuteness, a fine scholar, a fine forensic orator, and some master of the brawls has crunched him up in his hand like a bit of paper. At last they sent a man with a back, and he defied the whole Southern delegation when they attempted to smother him, and has conquered them. Mr. Adams is a man of great powers, but chiefly he is a sincere man, and not a man of the moment and of a single measure. And besides the success or failure of the measure, there remains to him the respect of all men for his earnestness. When Mr. Webster argues the case, there is the success or the failure and the admiration of the unerring talent and the intellectual nature, but no respect for an affection to a principle. Could Mr. Webster have given himself to the cause of abolition of slavery in Congress, he would have been the darling of this continent of all the youth, all the genius, all the virtue in America. Had an angel whispered in his young ear, "Never mind the newspapers. Fling yourself on this principle of freedom. Show the legality of freedom. Though they frown and bluster, they are already half convinced, and at last you shall have their votes." The tears of the love and joy and pride of the world would have been his. God, the moral element, must ever be new, an electric spark. Then it agitates and deifies us. The instant when it is fixed and made chronic, it is hollowness and cant. It is the difference between poets and preachers. Concordia res parve crescunt. How finely dost thou times and seasons spin, and makes a twist checkered with night and day, which as it lengthens winds and winds us in, as bowls go on, but turning all the way. George Herbert. But Jove was the eldest born, and knows most. Homer. Quote, I conduct the reader through novel and solitary paths. Solitary indeed they must be, since they have been unfrequented from the reign of the Emperor Justinian to the present time, and novel, doubtless, to readers of every description, and particularly to those who have been nursed, as it were, in the bosom of matter, the pupils of experiment, darlings of sense, and legitimate descendants of the earth-born race that warred on the Olympian gods. Thomas Taylor, General Introduction to his Works of Plato. These are they in Taylor's mind, whose whole life is asleep, a transmigration from dream to dream, like men passing from bed to bed. He contrasts ever the knowledge of experiment with that of abstract science. The former is the cause of a mighty calamity to the soul, extinguishing her principal and brightest eye, the knowledge of divinity. One makes piety, the other atheism. There can be no other remedy for this enormous evil than the philosophy of Plato. Then follow Taylor's rich apostrophes to the stupid and experimental, Abandon then, ye groveling souls, etc. Thomas Taylor died at Walworth, near London, November 1st, 1835, aged 77. He was born in London in 1758 and learned the rudiments of Latin and Greek at St. Paul's School. He translated Aristotle, Plato, Proclus, Plotinus, Pausanias, Iamblichus, Porphyry. Tom Appleton Beckford. Beckford's Italy and Spain is the book of a Sybarite and of the Talleyrand Brummel, Vivian Grey school, written in 1787 to 1789, and much of the humor consists in the contrast between the volume of this Johnson and Gibbon sentence and the ballroom petulance it expresses. He delights in classic antiquity, and sunsets as associated with that mythology, in music and picturesque nature. He is only a dilettante, and before the humblest original worker would feel the rebuke of a solid domestic being, as of a creator of that classic world which he only gazes at, but lays no stone of it. He would affect contempt, but his confidence would be the great foolish multitude, and that steeds him not. For when a man has once met his master, that is a secret which he cannot keep. Yet the travelers, why should we blame any more than the thousands who stay at home and do less or worse? He loves twilight and sleep. Many of his criticisms are excellent. He says of the Duomo at Florence that the architect seems to have turned his church inside out, such is the ornate exterior and so simple is the interior. He says of Paul Veronese's Cana in Galilee that the people at the table seem to be decent persons accustomed to miracles. Ole Bull, a dignifying, civilizing influence, yet he was there for exhibition, not for music, for the wonders of his execution, not as Saint Cecilia incarnated, who would be there to carry a point, and degrading all her instruments into meekest means. Yet he played as a man who found a violin in his hand, and so bent to make much of that if he had found a chisel, or a sword, or a spyglass, or a troop of boys, would have made much of them. It was a beautiful spectacle. I have not seen an artist with manners so pleasing. What a sleep has of Egypt on his lips, in the midst of his rapturous music. We are impressed by a Burke or a Schiller who believes in embodying in practice ideas, because literary men, for the most part, who are cognizant of ideas, have a settled despair as to the realization of ideas in their own times. In Boston, I trod the street a little proudly that I could walk from Alston's Belshazzar's Feast to the Sculpture Gallery and sit before Michelangelo's Day and Night and the Antiques, then into the library, then to Ole Bull. We want deference, and when we come to realize that thing mechanically, we want acres. Scatter this hot, crowded population at respectful distances, each from each over the vacant world. Lane and his friends thought the cattle made all this wide space necessary, and that if there were no cows to pasture, less land would suffice. That a cow does not need so much land as my eye requires between me and my neighbor. For economy, it is not sufficient that you make now and then a sharp reduction, or that you deny yourself and your family to meanest things with their system of expense, but it needs a constant eye to the whole. You yourself must be always present throughout your system. You must hold the reins in your own hands and not trust to your horse. The farm must be a system, a circle, or its economy is not, and the fantastic farmers piece out of their omissions with cunning. The effect of these calamitous pictures of pauperism, which obtrude everywhere, even in the comic literature, in Punch and Judy, in Hood and Dickens, suggest an admonition not so much to charity as to economy, that we may be self-contained and ready when the calamity comes nearer to do our part. I think genius alone finishes. Classifying words outvalue many arguments. Upstart, cockney, granny, pedant, prig, precision, rowdy, niggers. Goethe, with his extraordinary breadth of experience and culture, the security with which, like a great continental gentleman, he looks impartiality over all literatures of the mountains, the provinces, and the sea, and avails himself of the best in all, contrasts with the rigor of the English and superciliousness and flippancy of the French. His perfect taste, the austere felicities of his style. It is delightful to find our own thought in so great a man. The finest women have a feeling we cannot sympathize with in regard to marriage. They cannot spare the exaltation of love and the experiences of marriage from their history. But shall a virgin descend to marry below her? Does she not see that nature may be trusted for completing her own cycle? The true virgin will raise herself by just degrees into a goddess admirable and helpful to all beholders. Henry Thoreau's conversation consisted of a continual coining of the present moment into a sentence and offering it to me. I compared it to a boy who, from the universal snow lying on the earth, gathers up a little in his hands, rolls it into a ball, and flings it at me. Henry said that the other world was all his art, that his pencils would draw no other, that his jackknife would cut nothing else. He does not use it as a means. Henry is a good, substantial child, not encumbered with himself. He has no troublesome memory, no wake, but lives extempore, and brings today a new proposition as radical and revolutionary as that of yesterday, but different. The only man of leisure in the town. He is a good Abbot Samson, and carries counsel in his breast. If I cannot show his performance much more manifest than that of the other grand promisers, at least I can see that with his practical faculty he has declined all the kingdoms of this world. Satan has no bribe for him. In America we are much rowdies in church and state, and very boys are so soon ripe that I think no philosophical skepticism will make much sensation. Spinoza pronounced that there was but one substance. Yes, verily, but that boy yonder told me yesterday that he thought the pine log was God. What can Spinoza tell the boy? Fourier has the immense merits of originality and hope. Whilst society is distracted with disputes concerning the Negro race, he comes to prescribe the methods of removing this mask and caricature of humanity, by bringing out the true and real form from underneath. In the woods, with their ever festal look, I am ever reminded of that parable which commends the merchant, who, seeing a pearl of great price, sold all to buy that. So I could not find it in my heart to chide the Yankee who should ruin himself to buy a patch of heavy timbered oakland. I admire the taste which makes the avenue to a house, were the house ever so small, through a wood, as it disposes the mind of guest and host alike to the deference due to each. Hail, vegetable gods! I observe two classes very easily among those capable of thought and spiritual life, namely, those who are very intelligent of this matter, and can rise easily into it on the call of conversation, and can write strongly of it, and secondly, those who think nothing else and live on that level and are conscious of no effort or even variety in experience. Life is made up of the interlude and interlabor of those two amicable worlds. We are amphibious and weaponed to live in both. We have two sets of faculties, the particular and the catholic, like a boat furnished with wheels for land and water travel. It is never strange an unfit marriage, since man is the child of this most impossible marriage, this of the two worlds. It is strange that Jesus is esteemed by mankind the bringer of the doctrine of immortality. The Lyceum should refuse all such pieces as were written to it. Behmen. I read a little in Behmen. In reading there is a sort of half and half mixture. The book must be good, but the reader must also be active. I have never had good luck with Behmen before today, and now I see that his excellence is in his comprehensiveness, not, like Plato, in his precision. His propositions are vague, inadequate, and straining. It is his aim that is great. He will know not one thing, but all things. He is like those great swaggering country geniuses that come now and then down from New Hampshire to college and soon demand to learn not Horace and Homer, but also Euclid and Spinoza and Voltaire and Palladio and Columbus and Bonaparte and Linnaeus. I read in him today the sentence, "Men do with truths as children with birds, either they crush them or they let them fly away." Again, "This new wine made the bottle new." Of Adam, his bones were strengths. Thus hath this rose of Sharon perfumed our graves. Jacob Behmen is a great man, but he accepted the accommodations of the Hebrew dynasty. Of course he cannot take rank with the masters of the world. His value, like that of Proclus, is chiefly for rhetoric. This is the end of Part 1 of Emerson's Journal Collection number 35. In the next video, we will complete Journal Collection number 35, starting with the entry, theory and practice in life. Thank you for listening.